Carl Jung once said, "People don't see God because they don't look low enough." And I think that applies to awareness too. When you start really seeing people, not who they pretend to be, but who they are underneath, it doesn't feel like enlightenment. It feels like loss. You stop laughing at the same jokes. You stop feeling safe in rooms that used to feel like home. You start noticing the cracks, the manipulation hidden under smiles, the insecurity disguised as confidence, the pain disguised as pride. It's disorienting, because suddenly the world that once felt colorful starts to fade, and all you can see is truth, raw, unfiltered, and sometimes ugly. Awareness has this strange side effect no one really warns you about. It isolates you, not because you suddenly think you're better than anyone, but because the world starts sounding different once you hear what's beneath the noise. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unhear what people really mean when they speak from their wounds. You can't go back to pretending things are fine when you've tasted what truth actually feels like. And that truth, it's sharp. It cuts through the illusions that once made life feel cozy. It exposes everything, the games, the masks, the emotional bargains we all silently agree to just to keep the peace. But once you start waking up, peace feels fake if it costs your authenticity. And that's when the distance starts to grow. The more you grow, the lonelier it gets, because you realize most people don't actually want to see. They just want to feel comfortable. They'd rather call it overthinking than self-awareness. They'd rather say, "You've changed," than ask themselves why they haven't. So you start stepping back. You stop engaging in gossip because you can feel the insecurity behind every innocent comment. You stop chasing validation because you understand that the people who can't see your worth will never be convinced by words anyway. You stop over-explaining yourself because you finally understand people only hear you from the level of awareness they're at. And if someone's living in denial, your truth will sound like an attack. That's when silence becomes your new language. But here's what nobody tells you: that silence doesn't just protect your peace, it reveals everything. When you stop explaining, people show you who they are. When you stop reacting, you see who's been trying to control your emotions. And when you start prioritizing your energy, you realize who was only there for the version of you that needed saving. Silence exposes what words used to cover up. And yes, that silence scares people, because they can no longer read you. They can't manipulate what they can't decode. They can't control someone who's no longer performing. But maybe that's the point. Maybe awareness isn't about seeing more. It's about no longer letting the wrong people see into you. There's a moment in every awakening where you look around and realize you don't belong anywhere anymore. It sneaks up quietly. The people, the habits, even your own thoughts, they all start shedding like dead skin. You try to hold on, but something deep inside of you just won't let you. You become too deep for small talk, too honest for fake harmony, too awake to keep pretending you don't notice the things that once helped you sleep at night. And it hurts, deeply, because before the light comes the loneliness. No one tells you that awakening feels like grief. You're not just losing people. You're losing versions of yourself that used to survive around them. The people you once laughed with suddenly feel like strangers. The things that used to excite you now feel empty. Even your own mind starts to turn against you, questioning, doubting, dismantling every false comfort you ever built. You'll scroll through your old messages and realize you don't have the energy to perform anymore. You'll sit in rooms that used to feel warm and realize your spirit feels misplaced. And you'll wonder if maybe you went too far, if maybe awareness is the problem. But it's not. You're just seeing clearly for the first time. That's the part no one warns you about. You think growth will make you feel powerful, but it makes you feel lost first. You think healing will bring peace, but it brings clarity. And clarity destroys illusions, especially the comforting ones. See, healing isn't the high people post about. It's the quiet collapse of everything false. It's the moment you realize the peace you wanted comes with a price. Letting go of everything that made you avoid yourself. And that's why it hurts. Because part of you still wants the old life, the easy one, the familiar one, even though you know it's too small for you now. You're in between worlds, no longer who you were, not yet who you're becoming. And that's not failure, that's transformation. What you're experiencing isn't depression. It's not failure, it's expansion. You're literally outgrowing the old version of yourself, the one that tolerated noise just to avoid silence, that stayed in rooms that drained you because leaving felt rude, that said, "I'm fine," when you were quietly falling apart. That old self wasn't fake, it was survival. It did what it had to do to feel loved, to stay safe, to belong. But at some point, your soul decides that survival isn't enough anymore. It wants truth, it wants peace, it wants you. So when people start leaving, when conversations dry up, when your phone goes quiet and your weekends suddenly have more space than noise, don't panic. You're not losing your life. You're clearing it. You're not being punished. You're being prepared. That silence isn't emptiness. It's recalibration. It's your energy untangling from everything that was never aligned with it in the first place. It's your nervous system finally taking a breath after years of overstimulation. Think of it like moving out of a crowded apartment. At first it feels strange, too quiet, too spacious. You can hear your own thoughts echo. You might even miss the noise. But give it time, and that quiet starts to feel like peace. You realize how heavy it was to live in constant noise. The noise of others' opinions, of your own people-pleasing, of pretending to be okay. And little by little, that silence becomes sacred. It becomes your sanctuary. Because it's in that stillness that you finally start to hear your real voice again. So when that ache hits, that feeling of isolation that creeps in when you start choosing yourself, remind yourself, this isn't loneliness, it's detox. It's the shedding of every version of you that was built to make others comfortable. You're not falling apart. You're making room for peace, for truth, for the kind of love that won't require you to shrink. This is what growth actually feels like. It's not glamorous, it's not romantic, it's raw, confusing, and sometimes unbearably quiet, but it's real. And one day when you look back, you'll realize this silence was the first sound of your freedom. Jung called this stage individuation, the quiet, terrifying, liberating process of becoming whole. Not by fixing yourself, not by fitting in, but by facing the parts you were told to hide. See, most of us grow up learning who we're supposed to be: polite, productive, agreeable, whatever keeps us safe. But somewhere along the way, we lose sight of who we actually are. And that's when the tension begins, between the mask you wear and the voice that won't shut up inside. Individuation is that moment you stop negotiating with your own truth. You start looking your shadow in the eye and saying, "I see you. Let's figure this out." It's not about self-improvement, it's about self-confrontation. Not becoming better, but becoming real. And real doesn't always look pretty. Sometimes it looks like saying no for the first time. Sometimes it looks like outgrowing people who once felt like home, or realizing you were chasing validation more than connection. That's why your old friendships start to dissolve. That's why certain rooms feel colder now, because the version of you they loved doesn't live there anymore. When you shift from survival to authenticity, the world doesn't applaud, it tests you. You'll be misunderstood, maybe even resented. But it's not rejection, it's recalibration. Every ending, every loss, every awkward silence is carving space for alignment. For relationships that don't need your mask. For peace that doesn't need permission. Individuation is lonely, yes, but it's the kind of loneliness that turns into power. Because once you've met yourself in the dark, nobody can take that light away again. Seeing too much can feel like a curse at first. You start catching what others miss, the tension behind someone's smile, the bitterness hidden in a joke, the way people say, "I'm fine," but their eyes betray the truth. You begin to notice patterns, not just in others, but in yourself too. The way you attract the same kind of chaos, the same kind of pain, because part of you still believes you can fix it this time. That if you just love harder, explain better, stay longer, maybe it'll heal. And for a while, you try, you talk, you guide, you share what you've learned about pain, about projection, about shadow work. But then it hits you. People don't change because you understand them. They change because they finally see what you see. And most people aren't ready for that kind of seeing. They'll defend their illusions like their life depends on it, because in a way it does. Their entire identity, their relationships, their sense of safety, it all rests on the stories they tell themselves. So you learn to step back, not out of arrogance, but mercy. You stop trying to drag people toward awareness, because you realize awareness isn't a gift you can give. It's a fire they have to choose to walk through. That's when your silence starts to feel sacred. You begin to understand the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness aches for someone to understand you. Solitude holds space for you to understand yourself. You stop needing to explain your depth. You stop shrinking your perception to make others comfortable. You realize that peace isn't found in louder rooms, it's found in honest ones. And sometimes those rooms only have one person in them, you. Because the higher your awareness rises, the smaller your circle gets. Not because you're better than others, but because you're finally aligned with truth. And truth doesn't attract crowds, it attracts clarity. And that's enough. Here's the paradox. The same loneliness that feels like death is actually your rebirth. Every person you lose makes space for your alignment. Every moment of isolation deepens your intuition. And every silent night is training you to stand on your own energy. When you stop pretending, you start breathing again. And when you start breathing again, you stop settling. So yes, you're outgrowing everything. And that's exactly what you're supposed to do. You're not broken, you're just awake. When you outgrow everything, it's not arrogance, it's evolution. You've stopped needing permission to be yourself. And that's what scares people most. But keep going, because the people who can meet you at this new depth, they're coming. The peace that doesn't feel foreign yet, it's forming. The life that actually fits you, it's waiting. Loneliness is not the end of the road. It's the bridge to your real self. You're not losing people. You're finding yourself. If this resonates, subscribe right now. Hit like, drop a comment, and keep exploring these hidden truths with me.